Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Luke with Luke F1 Fantasy. And as you know, you can see I've got a little bit of a different background on this one. So I am filming while on location, on vacation. So my editing is a little bit limited. My microphone may be a little bit off today. I don't have my recording mic, but still been taking a look at the analysis, still been taking a look at some strategy and some tips, and definitely a lot of thoughts going on in here. So stick around for those. This will be my only video this week, just due to timing and how this week's going with traveling and when the race will be happening. So this is my team preview, my final thoughts video, all in one. But feel free to put your comments on this one. Follow me on X. The links will be in the description below, and to kind of keep in contact and keep in touch that way. But also make sure you are subbed and following along. We are on a push to 500 subs. We're about 50 away from that. So let's try and get there before summer break. But ultimately, thanks again for taking the time to watching these videos and for the support. So really appreciate that. So let's talk about Belgium and the most boring sprint weekend I've probably ever watched. It was honestly a bit of a snooze fest. Not much happened in the sprint. There was definitely more overtakes that seemed to happen than they seemed to show on screen. But yeah, it didn't really seem to be too much noticeable going on. And then fast forward to the race where it was clearly going to be a wet race, clearly going to be chaos, all sorts of carnage. And the FIA director probably still had some, images of Australia in their mind, probably had already played their no negative at Miami. And yeah, they just decided to delay the race until all the heavy rain and all the risk of the race had gone. And it completely not only killed the vibe of the weekend or killed the vibe of the race, but it also killed the value of the no negative chip. Turned out to be pretty much a dry race. Furthermore, came into a dry strategy and really no greens to be had. So that was frustrating. For me itself, I also was someone who also got burned on the no negative chip. It wasn't on my team one because I had played that in Miami, but I did try to play the no negative chip in the McLaren mini league that's currently going on. But yeah, I certainly got bore the brunt of that issue as well. So I definitely feel some frustration for you guys there. But the irony of the no negative chip, for when you compare it to managers like myself, who did go and play the no negative chip in Miami, which turned out to be a great play because it worked. We all locked in after Leclerc just binned it on the way to the grid for the sprints, totally braced for chaos. I think if there was a world record for when the no negative was played, it was probably 5 minutes before sprint team lock-in in Miami. There must have been so many people that just went, boom, click, no negative play after seeing Leclerc hit the wall. And then there was, 4 DNFs in the race the following day, but none of them were due to the wet weather itself. Nothing like Australia by any means. Lots of mechanical DNFs that ended up saving the day. So we played it for rain, didn't really get the result for rain, and turns out got the luck. And then fast forward to Belgium, the rain should have been there, and completely just didn't happen. So the wet weather, chip timing, FIA decisions, it's a wild mix, and it sort of begs the question, how do we use or view the no negative moving forward? Typically, it's been quite weather dominant, kind of always saving it for a rainy weekend. But now the FIA have thrown this sort of precedent into the mix that if they feel like the things are getting too risky, they can delay the race. What does that mean? Could you have teams that start lobbying for rain delays if it helps them? Think about teams that have qualified in the dry, kind of what was this weekend. They've got their rear wing set up, front wing set up to a certain position. And you've got to sort of balance parc ferme and what you can do. Is race control going to start playing into strategy? There's really no clear answers yet. We'll have to kind of sort of pay attention to what the repercussions of this are, and whether teams are, more fellow drivers such as Max and Lewis, they were more favoring like just racing the wet. I think certainly for guys like them, where they are very experienced, they're very skilled in the wet weather, like they want to race and they want to get out there. Maybe there's teams that are like, well, you know what, we're quite happy with where we've qualified yesterday, and maybe we want to push the FIA for a delay. So it's something to start factoring into our chip playbook. For those of you that still have to use it for this year or going into next year, this may be something we have to store in our memory bank, a bit of data collection to see how we can factor this in for the future. So coming out of Belgium, this is my team. So doing a check-in of where things are. So I'm coming out of Belgium with every driver getting a price rise, which is always the most perfect scenario, especially when we were still playing a very budget building template going into the sprint weekend. I had made just the one change, which was taking Bortoleto out and putting Lance Stroll in, and certainly both nailed it from a points and budget perspective. So been very happy with Stroll in my lineup this year. Was certainly one of the early adopters for Stroll in the start of the season. Got a lot of my budget that I have now is down to Lance Stroll, to be honest with you. He's probably given me at least 2.4, if not 3 million this year. So Lance Stroll, tip of the hat to you. But now I'm sitting on 3 transfers of Hungary, which was by design. I always sort of felt Stroll was always a 2-week hold. I had used no negative, so I'd planned for the worst case, that if it was a wet, chaos-driven weekend, I thought I may have had some more transfers to use. Dodged that, which has now left me with some options going into this week. Other than that, we're looking at some strongholds. Piastri, McLaren, Ferrari, all looking like strongholds. Hulkenberg still is going to be carrying his 45-pointer from Great Britain into this week, so becomes a hold. And Ollie Behrman did enough to consider a hold, as well as Lance Stroll. I could be looking at 1 transfer, I could be looking at 2. I don't think there's enough for me to go with 3 at this time, unless something crazy and funky happens. But where does that leave us for transfer targets then? So in our Tier A drivers, again, Piastri leading the way with needing -9 for a 0.1 and 14 for a 0.3, followed by Hamilton needing to score more than 0 for a 0.1 and 22 for a 0.3. Lando at 8 and 36. So these are our top 3 Tier A's that we're looking for. Again, Hamilton I don't think is in many people's teams at this point with his price at 23.7. And Lando, for those with higher budgets, people may be thinking about him. But for those teams that have just been purely budget building all year and now are closer to that 128, 129, you may be able to sneak Norris into your team for them. But Verstappen, Russell, and Leclerc all needing over 50 points for a win, and typically, even on a non-weekend, about 45 points is about the ceiling for what a driver could get between qualifying pole, winning a race, maybe sneaking a fastest lap or driver of the day. So I wouldn't be considering any of Verstappen, Russell, or Leclerc as buys this week. So we have Piastri as a hold or a buy. We have Hamilton potentially as a buy if you're wanting a differential. I wouldn't be putting Hamilton in as my 2x driver. If you're looking to squeeze him in as a 3x option or autopilot option, I think that could be a good bet because he's had some really good performances. He's kind of in Hamilton. If he can Hamilton qualifying badly and then coming through the field with his overtake ability can be quite spicy and may push. For us to consider Hamilton over Russell in some of these 4A type of meta builds, with being only sort of 1.4 over Russell, especially with Mercedes sort of seem to be sort of flatlining, if not decreasing on their performance this year. So I think Hamilton could be someone to consider, but not enough at this point to really move off Piastri. Into our Tier Bs there, we still have Hulkenberg leading the way, needing, over -27 for a 0.2, over -19 for a 0.6. So quite definitively a hold for Nico Hulkenberg, followed by Lance Stroll at -6 for a 0.2 and 2 points for a 0.6. So another strong hold for Lance, as we predicted. And then followed by Ollie Behrman, who needs 1 point for a 0.2 and 9 for a 0.6. So really, I think you've got Hulkenberg and Stroll to look at this as being the only really 2 B tiers that are going to get you 0.6. And then you have, probably 2 or 3 who maybe are more set for a 0.2 increase, more of a little increase. And in this list, we have guys like Ollie Behrman, Alex Albon, Fernando Alonso. And then when we get into sort of signs and below, with I think typically the average score for a B tier driver is about 7.5 points on a given week. So, kind of we get into Alonso, Sainz, Gasly, all of these, you can kind of see like the even to get to a 0.2 increase is they have to score above average. And again, if we're thinking that Hungary is a bit more of a lower overtake track, then it's going to be a bit of a risk. So if we are thinking of any of these B tiers that are more sort of lower down, so more have this sort of like maroony red brown shading, then only guys you're going to be looking at here is guys like Liam Lawson or Colapinto and Bortoleto as being close to that floor of 4.5 million. Bortoleto's at the 4.7, so if you can handle losing 0.2 million just to get him in, if you think he can do better than Lawson this week, I think that would be good. Otherwise, a lot of these are going to be sort of off our lists for this week as well. Constructors, we have McLaren and Ferrari again leading the way. Red Bull actually are back in the mix now after having two good performances, Silverstone and Belgium. Mercedes looking like that team that's a little bit more tricky to get that high increase. So even on a week where sort of, there may be some cooler weathers on Sunday or some rain, and it may throw some chaos into the mix, or typically we know when it's really hot that Mercedes don't do as well. Now we have the added component that they need 35 points to get a max increase, which always isn't the case for a Tier A constructor on a non-sprint weekend. So kind of still pushes us more into thinking to stick with a McLaren Ferrari lineup as opposed to the differentiator of going with the Mercedes. But once again, we'll always wait for the sims on that to see where things are going and how the FP1 and FP2 are going. And then into our B tiers, if we're still thinking B tiers, again, Aston, Kik, Haas leading the way for those, although it is getting more and more difficult to think about B tier constructors as we get closer and closer to a 4A build. So yeah, like I said, my transfer targets or options for this week is I'm looking at Alonso being the most risk of losing value this week. And as I'm still thinking ahead to where I want my team to go, and I'm not quite at the budget that I want to be for sort of affording the most premium of assets, bringing in a Lawson or Bortoleto are strong possibilities for me. Lawson's at the 4.5 million floor. He can't drop in any more budget. He's still in a decent car that Racing Bulls has shown to be quite an easy car to drive. As long as he kind of avoids sort of incidents in that sort of first stint in the race, I think Lawson generally tends to settle into a race. And I think with his performance this week, with sort of scoring 9 points, like almost double his score, he looks like he could also be a hold for the following race in Zandvoort too. So Lawson for me is sort of the prime transfer target. I would consider Bortoleto as the next best, even though he has a possibility of losing 0.2 million in Hungary. The Kik car still continues to be competitive. He got 7 points in Belgium again, almost double his points, his value. And so he also could be a hold for Zandvoort as well. For that reason, if he does lose you 0.2 million, he does score quite okay in if kind of scores at least sort of close to the average of drivers beated points at 7.5, then he could lose you 0.2 million this week, but he also could gain you 0.6 million the following week. So a 0.4 million net gain over 2 weeks is probably more realistic and probably not too bad of a play if you're kind of just wanting to avoid Lawson, you have bad vibes about Racing Bull, and if riding Kik has been shown to be a strong strategy this year. So I do rank it as Lawson top, Bortoleto next, and then I would put Colapinto at the bottom of that, but I kind of would avoid Colapinto and I kind of would avoid Alpine. The constructors, Ferrari over Mercedes, I still think so. I think a hot weekend, recent Mercedes struggles, I don't think it's worth the switch if you're already on Ferrari. maybe if you are coming out of a triple McLaren build and you have a Kick or Aston in your team, and now you're wondering whether to jump into a Mercedes or Ferrari, I think you have the opportunity to take a look at free practice 1, free practice 2 results. If you're getting a vibe that Mercedes look good this week, then I think you may be a team that could jump onto Mercedes this week instead of Ferrari. Use that as your differential. But I think I don't know if I would do the change from Ferrari to Mercedes at this point. Red Bull are showing signs of improvement. I think we still need to see more consistent signs from Yuki Tsunoda before we do go there. But they have won the 2 overall fastest pit stops in the last 2 races too. So Red Bull are actually hoping, they're maintaining their value by getting some points off the track and in the pit lane. Which is sort of slightly devalue what Ferrari are doing. You can kind of see, I mentioned that in the tweet this coming week. But yeah, like I said, I think Yuki needs to show us more before we can kind of trust them from a custom basis on points. Would I drop to a B tier constructor? I think that window may have closed for me at this point. I did try going the B tier constructor back in Canada. It didn't pay off, which I was close to nailing it that weekend. If I played the Aston build in Silverstone, I would have been very happy. So I was 1 week early on it. But it does show it does have some volatility. Sometimes these things have to go in your way. There needs to be some chaos, some carnage for some of these B tier constructors to challenge the A tier constructors on points on a weekly basis. And again, it probably just depends on where the weather falls. If the weather falls like it could be chaos, then maybe avoiding one of the premium constructors is a route to go. Yeah, so that kind of sums up the single transfer analogy. That will then, kind of keep me rolling with transfers, gives me 3 to work with in Zandvoort coming out of the summer break. The other option would be looking into outside of that, I don't really know where else I would get extra advantage over the field. So if the other sort of asset we could be looking at is an Alex Albon, but the trouble is I can't just do a single transfer from Alonso to Albon just due to the price that is there. So it would mean also having to take out Ollie Behrman. So I could get Alex Albon into there and then also be able to get Liam Lawson in. So this really only is going to be in a situation if Haas kind of just completely just look off it. They're looking like they're really, really, really bad, which they just haven't really looked like that this year. But it's difficult to sort of make the case for Alex Albon. Yes, he may get some points, could be a good hold, but no, I could make those 2 transfers and still be rolling a transfer into Zandvoort, which is again not the end of the world. And yeah, and if Alex and Williams are looking like they could be top 8 candidates again, then I think this could be viable. With Haas being able to sort of pop into the top 10 at any given point, though, again, we just need to see a lot more from Alex to justify the price increase and the number of points available for that to happen. Because if we do look into sort of R. Stern's spreadsheet that does sort of predict with where things may be in Netherlands, I do have some reservations about putting Alex Albon in just because of his price. We know that B tiers typically get about 7.3, and I'm sort of looking around seeing like a lot of our sort of like templatey B tiers right now. A lot of them are over 7 million right now. You've got Hulkenberg at 9, Stroll at 9, Behrman at 8.1, Gasly at 9.1. These are the more popular picks at this moment in time. Albon at 10.6, and that I think there's going to be a bit of a meta to switch off these in 1 to 2 races, which will then be flipping back to B tiers that are more valued in that 4.5 to sort of like 7 million, like under the 7 points, sort of 7.5 million of average. So, in 1 to 2 races, we could be looking into a flip into the template where rather than sort of Hulkenberg, Alonso, Stroll, Behrman, we're going to be in a situation where a lot more teams are going to be in the Liam Lawson, the Bortoleto, maybe one other like Carlos Sainz at 6.3, who's probably likely to be sort of maybe closer to, Sainz at 6.5 and probably more likely to be, 5.9 or 6.1 going into Zandvoort. You got Gasly, who's sort of going to fall like a stone now, and he can go down to 4.5 very, very, within 3 races. And so it's sort of building, like, we've got to be starting to think of getting off Hulkenberg, Stroll, Behrman at this point, and then started putting that budget somewhere else. I do look at Kimi Antonelli as being a asset that we can use to sort of kickstart or jump our teams before we get into maybe more of the premium A tier 4A builds with a Russell or Hamilton Leclerc. Because Antonelli, with this 21 points that he got in Belgium, like his minus 16 from Silverstone is gonna drop off, and Antonelli could then ride this 21 points for a couple of weeks, and maybe we can squeeze to the like 0.6 to 1.2 million of budget out of him. And so I look at a team of a Piastri, Carlos Sainz, Antonelli, McLaren, and Ferrari, and then sort of picking along sort of like the budget ones in there. So I could go with the Lawson and Bortoletto, which at this point with the current budget leaves me 2.4. So it means I don't really have to do too much chasing this week, and I can just sort of somewhat play it safe. But also looking ahead to budget building, because I still want budget building to happen, because this then could form a particular situation. From a chip check-in perspective, strategies for this week. Limitless, I think it's now or never. Again, if most of us went with that templated team, you still have Limitless. You're going in with a team that's, I don't think everyone's going to increase this week, but prices are beginning to flatten. So I would jump on it now before your squad starts to trend down. And for Limitless, my thoughts would be for Limitless, if you are doing Limitless, then the triple McLaren, triple Ferrari would be my recommendation, plus max. Until the sim comes out, then see how the free practice results are going, see what the sims say, and then pivot out on those dependent on the qualifying results. Potentially take a punt on a driver that's qualified out of position and see if they could be the person to get those overtakes in that DRS zone. All right, so that's going to bring it a wrap on this video, guys. I'm recording this on vacation, still locked into F1 Fantasy, still trying to get out some content to you. So for any final thoughts and changes, you can catch me on Twitter, on X, and in the comments below on this video. Again, if you've liked this video, please hit that subscribe button as you leave. Other than that, we will thank you again for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.